God! 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 God!
Let's take a seat at Volusia County Court, where a dramatic scene unfolds. 19-year-old Damon Kemp was to be sentenced for the double murders of his roommates, Trey Ace Ingram and Jordan Payton. Both victims were 19 years old and had been shot multiple times. Kemp made quite a grand entry into the courtroom when he was wheeled in screaming the word God repeatedly at the top of his lungs. When a Daytona Beach police officer arrived at the Jade Park apartment homes to investigate a home invasion, the last thing he expected was to come face to face with a murderer. Damon Kemp ran up to the officer saying, "I killed my friend." By the time police arrived at apartment 434 at the complex where he lived, what they discovered was shocking. First, officers discovered a bullet hole in the door and a shell casing on a stair nearby. When they eventually got inside, they found the bodies of Trey Aces Ingram and Jordan Payton. Ingram, who was a Bethune-Cookman University student and former high school football player at Santa Lucis High School, and Pope John Paul II High School in Boca Raton, had been shot 4 times. Payton, who was also a student, suffered 6 gunshot wounds. The bodies of both boys were discovered very close to the apartment door, almost like they had been trying to get away. About 50 feet from where Kemp stopped the officer earlier, investigators found an unloaded .40 caliber Glock handgun, and somewhere else at the complex, an empty extended magazine was recovered. Kemp, who had been living at Ingram's apartment for free until he was asked to leave, was arrested after the bodies were discovered.
Tonight, the 19-year-old accused of murdering his teenage roommates is locked up in jail, and a judge is not letting him out. When Damon Kemp was wheeled into the courtroom this morning for his bond hearing, he started screaming, and the victims' families couldn't handle it.
When Kemp made his first appearance in court, it was nothing short of dramatic. Perhaps this was a guise to plead insanity as his defense, but the judge wasn't having it, as he was sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms for the murders. When Kemp discovered his erratic behavior wasn't enough to sway the decision of the judge, he was seen with a weird and rather disbelieving look on his face.
One family will never see their child again. Another will only see theirs behind bars. A judge has sentenced 15-year-old Joshua Phillips to life in prison for killing his neighbor, 8-year-old Maddie Clifton.
Let's head to Polk County Courthouse, where sentencing is underway for 15-year-old Joshua Phillips, who was convicted of murdering his 8-year-old neighbor by beating her with a baseball bat, slitting her throat, and stabbing her chest multiple times. This murder occurred in November 1998, when Joshua Phillips was just 14 years old. On November 3rd, 1998, 8-year-old Maddie Clifton went to the then 14-year-old Phillips's Jacksonville home, asking him to come play baseball with her. Both kids were quite friendly with each other, so Phillips agreed with her, although he had a very strict dad who didn't want him having friends over when no adult was home. While both kids were playing baseball, Phillips accidentally hit the ball on Clifton's eye, which caused her to cry and scream as she was bleeding. He began to panic, and fearing his father's reaction to having Clifton in the house, he dragged her inside his room, where he hit her with the baseball bat to stop her from screaming before placing her under his waterbed. When his father arrived, nothing seemed out of place, and the duo interacted normally before Phillips returned to his room, where he noticed Clifton was alive and moaning under his bed. He then slit her throat and stabbed her in the chest 7 times, and again left her body under the bed. By 6:33 p.m. that day, the 8-year-old was reported missing after she failed to appear for dinner at 6:20 p.m. For 6 days, the police and volunteers searched for the missing girl, with Phillips participating. There was even a £72,000 reward for her safe return. Still, it wasn't till November 10th, 1998, before Maddie's body was discovered. Joshua's mother had noticed a wet patch in his room, and when she searched for the source, she found 2 small feet with white socks sticking out from Joshua's waterbed. She immediately alerted the police, who sealed the room as a crime scene, and Joshua was arrested while he was at his school, the A. Philip Randolph Academies of Technology. Joshua Phillips's trial caused quite a sensation in the nation, considering the age of the defendant and the gory details of the crime. Initially scheduled to be held at Duval County, the trial was moved to Polk County, Florida, and officially began on July 6, 1999, where Phillips was tried as an adult. Prosecutors argued that the murder was sexually motivated, as part of Maddie's clothes weren't found. However, an autopsy revealed no signs of sexual assault, and Phillips's defense team argued that murder was an act that began as an accident and deteriorated through panic that bordered on madness. The trial only lasted 2 days, and Phillips was found guilty of first-degree murder. He was then sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole.
I'm certain that on Judgment Day, you, Joshua Earl Patrick Phillips, will be given a far harsher sentence than I can impose.
The judge then continued by saying,
Until that day, it is the sentence of this court that you be delivered by the sheriff of Polk County into the custody of the Department of Corrections of the state of Florida, to be confined in prison without the benefit of parole for the rest of your natural life.
As the judge read out his sentence, Phillips, who was standing close to his attorney, didn't appear to show any emotions at the prospect of spending the rest of his life in prison. Since then, Phillips has continued to appeal his verdict to no avail.
She looks like she's not breathing. I tried to do CPR.
Okay, is she breathing or no?
No, she's not.
Take a seat at Broward County Circuit Court, where the controversial case of 13-year-old Lionel Tate is ongoing. The young boy was convicted of first-degree murder of a 6-year-old girl who had been in his house. This case would eventually make Tate the youngest American citizen to ever be sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Lionel Tate was just 12 years old when he brutally murdered a 6-year-old girl named Tiffany Unick. Deweese Unick Paul, Tiffany's mom, was friends with Lionel's mother, Kathleen Grossett Tate, after they moved to Broward County, Florida. Both were single mothers and would regularly help each other take care of the children. Lionel Tate at the time was unusually large for his age, weighing 166 pounds, and was nearly 6 feet tall. However, he was quite friendly with Tiffany and didn't display any sign of violence that would make anyone worried. Tiffany, his playmate, was the exact opposite in appearance, weighing just 48 pounds. On July 28, 1999, the kids were over at Lionel's home, where his mother was the one watching the kids. She worked as a Florida state trooper and was scheduled to work an overnight shift. On that day, she fed the children and then went upstairs to take a nap while they played downstairs. 45 minutes later, Lionel went to tell his mother that Tiffany was not breathing. She immediately contacted 911 and then called Tiffany's mother to tell her that her daughter wasn't breathing. By the time the young girl was rushed to the hospital, she was pronounced dead. When an autopsy was carried out, it revealed that her legs, neck, and feet were seriously bruised and her skull was fractured. She also had a lacerated liver, a fractured rib, and a swollen brain. These same wounds would later be described as similar to those she would have sustained by falling from a 3-story building. After the autopsy reveal, Lionel became a prime suspect in Tiffany's murder and was immediately arrested and charged with first-degree murder. At the young age of 13, Tate was to be tried as an adult in court, and on January 25, 2001, the jury unanimously convicted Lionel Tate of first-degree murder.
We, the jury, find the defendant is guilty of murder in the first degree as charged in the indictment.
A few days after his 14th birthday, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Incarceration for your natural life.
According to Judge Joel T. Lazarus, the acts of Lionel Tate were not the playful acts of a child. The acts of Lionel Tate were cold, callous, and indescribably cruel. Although Tate didn't burst into tears as expected of a young teenager, his reaction showed that he didn't take the sentence well.
Tonight, we are learning more disturbing details of a mass murder in Albuquerque's South Valley. A 15-year-old Nehemiah Griego is in jail after telling investigators he shot and killed his parents and 3 younger siblings.
Next, we head to the Bernalillo County District Courtroom, where 22-year-old Nehemiah Griego is about to be sentenced after he was convicted of fatally shooting and killing his parents and 3 younger siblings when he was 15 years old in New Mexico. This case shocked the nation with its brutality, especially since the accused was merely a teen when he committed the murders. On January 19, 2013, 15-year-old Nehemiah Griego walked to his parents' bedroom at midnight and shot his mother while she slept with a .22 rifle in their home in South Valley, New Mexico. His younger brother, 9-year-old Zephaniah, was his next victim. He then went up to the room his younger sisters, 5-year-old Jael and 2-year-old Angelina, shared and shot them with the same rifle he used in murdering his mother and brother. Almost like he was crazed, Nehemiah went downstairs and waited for his father to return from his overnight shift at a homeless shelter. Immediately, 51-year-old Greg Griego walked in at 5 a.m. Nehemiah shot him multiple times with an AR-15 type semi-automatic rifle with a scope. He then placed 2 loaded rifles in the family van and drove to church, but not before emailing a picture of his dead mother to his 12-year-old girlfriend. This mass murders was very bizarre considering that Nehemiah appeared to be a great kid with no tendency for violence. What many didn't know was that the 15-year-old had a dark fantasy about committing mass murders, followed by his own suicide. He had been planning the murders of his family for a while, until that sad day when his fantasies eventually crystallized into reality. After murdering 5 members of his family, Nehemiah had driven away from the house with the intent habit of murdering more people and eventually dying in a gun battle with the police. However, when he got to the Calvary Chapel, where his father was a former pastor, he told the pastor there that his family had been killed in an accident. That was when they knew something was wrong. The police were called to investigate the home and the bodies were discovered. Nehemiah confessed to the murders, saying he was angry at his mother and had suicidal thoughts. Thankfully, he had 5 older siblings who didn't live at their South Valley home in Albuquerque, New Mexico, so they escaped the shooting. He was booked into Bernalillo County Juvenile Detention Center, where he was charged with 2 counts of murder and 3 counts of child abuse resulting in death. In October 2015, Griego pleaded guilty to the charges against him, and in 2019, he was brought to the Bernalillo County Circuit Courthouse, where he was to be formally sentenced as an adult. Just before he was sentenced, Nehemiah spoke for the very first time in court since he was arrested and apologized to his surviving relatives.
I am sorry for taking our parents and our sins. I wish I can take it back, but reality is that we can't.
He was ultimately sentenced to 3 concurrent life sentences with the possibility of parole after serving 30 years. With his back turned to the camera, it was hard to gauge Nehemiah's reaction to his sentence, but his disposition showed one of resignation.
I would give my life for Austin. I loved him.
At the New York State Supreme Court, a little drama unfolds as a 17-year-old teenager accused of murdering a 23-month-old child desperately tries to let the courtroom know the murder had been an accident. Take a seat as we run through the unfortunate case of Dylan Shoemaker, who was so desperate to avoid suffering the consequences of his action that he retorted to manipulation. On March 19, 2013, in Springville, New York, Dylan, 16 at the time, was babysitting his girlfriend's 2 sons while she was away at work. Ashley Smith, a mother of both boys, had been thrown out by her family and decided to live with Dylan at his family house, even though none of the kids were his. By the time Smith returned from work, she discovered that her eldest son, 23 months old Austin Smith, was dead. Dylan, who was charged with taking care of both kids, was immediately arrested as a prime suspect in the sudden death of the victim. An autopsy further revealed that the 2-year-old had been brutally murdered, as he had ruptured blood vessels in his left ear and near the right eye. He also had bleeding in the retina and perioptic nerve, as well as between the layers of the brain. Young Austin had died of severe brain injury as a result of repeated blows. Dylan ultimately confessed to the murder, saying that he had severely beaten the young boy because he was crying and disturbing his baby brother. To drown out his tears, Dylan claimed to have placed a pillow on Austin's head and punched it. The jury found him guilty of second-degree murder, which held a sentence of 25 years to life in prison. Right before his sentencing in January 2014, Dylan, who was now 17 years old, made a statement in the courtroom addressed to his girlfriend, trying to let her know that he didn't mean to kill Austin.
I didn't mean to kill Austin. Ashley, I really didn't. I really think I did that. I didn't mean to hurt him.
To the unsuspecting, this declaration of love for his victim seemed very sincere and was very convincing, except that it wasn't true. While he awaited trial, Dylan had placed a phone call to his mother. During the conversation, the teenager suggested using his skin color as a white man and his age to appeal to the emotions of the jury and public, which could help with a lighter sentence. Judge M. William Bowler, who presided over the case, didn't fall for this antic and even brought up the phone conversation at his sentencing, ensuring everyone saw that he was a manipulator.
The record will show that you admitted that on July 23, 2013, in a phone call to your mother from the holding center, you stated, and I got a quote from the court reporter, "I am a 16-year-old blonde. Probably all I have to do is cry in front of the jury, and they're going to feel sorry for me."
Dylan was sentenced to 25 years to life for the murder of Austin Smith. He was seen crying out as soon as he heard the judge's verdict. Let's head to Lawrence County Circuit Court, where Evan Miller, a 16-year-old teenager, is being tried for the murder of a 52-year-old man. Miller was 14 years old when he and his friend decided to rob and murder Cole Cannon by beating him with a baseball bat and setting his trailer on fire. On July 15, 2003, 14-year-old Evan Miller, alongside his friend Colby Smith, decided to rob 52-year-old drug dealer and neighbor Cole Cannon. The 2 boys went to Cannon's trailer, where 3 of them smoked marijuana and drank alcohol together. Cannon was heavily intoxicated, so he fell asleep, and that was when the boys decided to rob him. However, as Miller was replacing Cannon's wallet, he woke up, and that was when Smith decided to hit him with a baseball bat. Miller took up the bat and proceeded to beat Cannon severely with it. Both boys successfully stole $350 in baseball cards, but perhaps scared of what they had done, they decided to set fire to Cannon's trailer to destroy the evidence of their crime. Cannon died of smoke inhalation as well as severe injuries. Both boys were eventually arrested, and officers couldn't help but wonder why and how a 14-year-old had committed such a violent crime. Turns out Miller had grown up in an extremely violent home where his father frequently physically abused him, his mother, and siblings. Both parents were alcoholics, and his mother was also a drug addict. Due to the abuse he suffered at the hands of his father, he even attempted to hang himself once, just so he could escape the violence, and would attempt to commit suicide 5 more times during his childhood. He also turned to drugs at the young age of 8, while receiving mental health treatment from local health centers. At the age of 10, Miller and his siblings were eventually taken away from home and placed in foster care where everything seemed all right. Unfortunately, he was returned to the custody of his addict mother, who neglected him. This was when his own drug addiction escalated, and by now he had started using marijuana, crystal methamphetamines, and even ingested prescription medication daily. All of these contributed to the violent person he became. In 2004, Miller was transferred from the Lawrence County Juvenile Court to Lawrence County Circuit Court, where he was to be tried as an adult for capital murder. At his trial in October 2006, the jury found him guilty of capital murder and aggravated robbery, and on October 20th, 2006, Miller was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Although there is no footage of the court proceedings, this image of Miller and Smith showed a teen who wasn't so scared of the consequences of his actions. At the Geauga County Common Pleas Court, 18-year-old Thomas T.J. Lane decided to make sure that his sentencing was one that the nation would remember for a long time. The teenager responsible for the 2012 mass shooting at Chardon High School in Ohio that left 3 dead and others wounded walked into the courtroom and immediately unbuttoned his shirt, revealing the word "killer" sprawled across the shirt he wore underneath. On February 27, 2012, at 7:30 a.m., T.J., wearing a shirt with the words "killer" written on it, made his way to the cafeteria of Chardon High School, Ohio, where students were gathered before their morning classes. No one expected that the scrawny teenager would suddenly open fire at the students. After shooting for a very short time, Lane immediately fled the scene but was tackled by football coach Frank Hall and another teacher named Joseph Ricci. When police arrived at the school, 6 people had suffered from the attack. Sadly, 3 students identified as Russell King Jr., Demetrius Hewlin, and Danny Parmenter had died from their injuries. Joy Rickers and Nick Walsack were also seriously injured and were taken to a local hospital. Nick was left permanently paralyzed from the injuries he sustained. The 6th student only suffered superficial wounds. Following investigations, the police were able to come up with a motive for the crime. Lane had a personal rivalry with one of the dead victims, Russell King Jr. According to student witnesses, King had recently started dating Lane's former girlfriend and threatened to beat him up. Lane, angered by this, began to prepare for the fight and even took up weightlifting. Still, no one expected that he would go as far as shooting up the school's cafeteria just to get back at King. In fact, he had aimed and shot at King first before proceeding to shoot others. At his sentencing on March 19, 2013, TJ showed no sign of guilt even after he pleaded guilty to the multiple charges against him. He showed gross disrespect by wearing a replica of what he had worn on the day of the shooting to the courtroom in a bid to mock the victims' families.
Moments after entering the courtroom, Ohio school shooter T.J. Lane took off his shirt. Underneath was a T-shirt with the word "killer" handwritten on it. It was similar to what he was wearing when police arrested him in February of 2012 after he opened fire in the Chardon High School cafeteria in northeastern Ohio.
He also displayed his absolute lack of remorse by smirking as one of the victim's mothers read her statement.
"You will never, ever be in my thoughts after this. Never. My family will move on, not you."
For his crime, Lane was sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. After his verdict was read, TJ was seen showing the middle finger to the bereaved families, telling them, "This hand that pulled the trigger that killed your sons now masturbates to the memory. F*** all of you."
I thought it was reaching for guns. I'm like, oh, you know what I'm saying? That's what he's done. He was gonna murder me or something.
You know. And then what did you do?
I shot him.
Welcome to Metro Juvenile Court, where 16-year-old Cyntoia Brown is about to face sentencing for the 2013 murder of Nashville real estate agent and youth pastor, 43-year-old Johnny Michael Allen. He was shot dead after Brown said he paid her $150 to have sex with him. She said she acted in self-defense because she thought he was going to rape or murder her, so she shot him. On the night of August 6, 2004, 16-year-old runaway teenager who was being pimped for sex, Cyntoia Brown met with 43-year-old Johnny Allen in the parking lot of a Sonic Drive-In on Murfreesboro Road, Nashville, Tennessee. According to Brown, Allen, a youth pastor and Sunday school teacher, offered her $150 to have sex with him. He took her to his place, and while there, Brown claimed he began showing her his gun collection, which made her scared for her life. At some point, she said she brought out a .40 caliber handgun from her purse and shot him in the back of the head in self-defense. She then stole $172 from his wallet, took 2 of his firearms, and fled the scene in his truck. Soon the police were alerted about the murder, and it wasn't long before Brown was arrested. At her trial in 2004, Cyntoia Brown was tried as an adult, and she kept insisting that she had not killed Allen to rob him, as the prosecutors believed, but did it because she was scared. Prosecutors, on the other hand, weren't buying her claim, as they said the police had discovered Allen's naked body with a gunshot wound to the back of his head, and he had been lying with his hands underneath his head with his fingers interlocked. This showed that he had been sleeping when he was shot. There was also no firearm found beside or under the bed where he was found. Prosecutors also brought up an attack that had happened at the Western Mental Health Institute, where Brown was taken for an evaluation. The witness was a nurse whom Brown had attacked. She prevented Brown from calling her adoptive mother, and during the attack, Brown said to her, "I shot that man in the back of the head one time. I'm going to shoot you in the back of the head 3 times. I'd love to hear your blood splatter on the wall."
We, the jury, find the defendant, Cyntoia Denise Brown, count 1, guilty, first-degree murder.
Cyntoia Brown was eventually found guilty of first-degree murder, felony murder, and aggravated robbery. She was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole when she was 67. Brown sat with a vacant look on her face as she learned her fate. In 2013, Tennessee Governor Bill Haslam commuted Brown's original sentence to 15 years, and on August 7, 2019, she was released from prison.
A St. Johns County judge ruled 16-year-old Aiden Fucci should spend his life in prison.
Let's take a look at the last case currently going on in a St. Johns County courtroom, where Judge R. Lee Smith presides over a case that shocked the entire nation when it first hit the news. Aiden Fucci was just 14 years old when he brutally murdered a 13-year-old by stabbing her 114 times. Today, he is about to learn what his fate would be.
It was not done in a fit of uncontrollable anger. There was no reason. There was no purpose. It was done for no other reason than to satisfy this defendant's internal desire to feel what it was like to kill someone.
On May 9, 2021, the family of 13-year-old Tristan Bailey was dismayed when their daughter didn't come downstairs to help with breakfast in celebration of Mother's Day. She was reported missing, and after an intensive search by the police, her body was discovered by a volunteer in a wooded area just outside of Jacksonville, Florida. The young girl had been stabbed a total of 114 times. An autopsy further revealed that 49 of the wounds were in fact defensive wounds. While everyone in St. Johns County was rattled by the vicious murder of the well-known and loved cheerleader, no one imagined that the killer would be her classmate. 14-year-old Aiden Fucci was captured on CCTV footage walking with Tristan at 1:10 a.m., just hours before she was declared missing. He was taken in by the police for questioning where he contradicted himself a lot. Due to these inconsistencies in his story, he was arrested on May 10, 2021, for the second-degree murder of Tristan Bailey. Further investigations at his home implicated him more as the sheath of a buck knife, which matched the one that was found near Tristan's body was found. The police also found bloody white Nike shoes and a t-shirt with blood on it. The second-degree murder was then upgraded to first-degree murder, and a motive was also discovered. According to his former girlfriend and friends, 14-year-old Fucci had a dark obsession with killing people, and even owned a pair of knives he named Poker and Picker. The murder of Tristan Bailey had merely been a case of being in the wrong place at the wrong time, as he already had plans of killing someone. 2 years later, on March 24, 2023, Fucci, who was already 16 years old, made an appearance in court where he was to be sentenced.
Mr. Fucci, having entered a plea of guilty to the crime of first-degree murder, I adjudicate you guilty of the premeditated first-degree murder of Tristan Bailey. I sentence you to life in prison. Because of your age, you are eligible for review of the sentence in 25 years.
Fucci was handed the maximum sentence due to the premeditated and brutal nature of the murder of Tristan Bailey. While his verdict was being read, Fucci displayed absolutely no emotions. These cases are chilling not just because of the brutal nature of the murders, but because they were all perpetrated by young kids. If this video of dangerous kids reacting to life sentences was an eye-opener, click on the card showing on your screen for more awesome videos like this. I'll be waiting on the other side.